Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Workplace Experience panel as part of the Inspired Virtual Summit. I'm joined today by two fantastic panelists. Firstly, Michael Roper, who is Vice President of Real Estate and Facilities at SAP, and Julie Clarke, who is Vice President of Human Resources at Sutherland. And myself, I'm Natalie Bage. I am the Future of Work and Workplace Strategy Director at Lloyds Banking Group. And we're going to talk to you a little bit today about how we're redefining our workplace strategy and our experience in 2021 post the pandemic. So I'm going to start off with a bit of an introduction question. So first of all, I'm going to come to Michael to just tell us a little bit about your organisation and how you expect ways of working to evolve post-COVID-19.
Thanks, Natalie, and hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Michael Roper, and my team manage the facilities and the real estate across the EMEA region. So that, for us, is around 50 countries, about 130 offices, and about 23,000 internal customers that we're looking after. Sorry for the clutter, by the way, in the background. This is my home secured, COVID-secured office. So you're seeing it all now without a background, so apologies for that. In terms of what COVID has done for us in terms of how we return to the office, we started a project before COVID looking at flexibility and agility for our employees. And we looked at our portfolio before COVID and we saw utilization in the region of 55, 60%, which I think is pretty similar to a lot of other corporates. And why is that? It's because people are working flexibly anyway. So COVID has come along and it galvanized and accelerated the need for flexibility and agility, but it hasn't created it on its own. So as we are opening our offices up, we're doing them very much under a COVID-secured methodology, but we're also looking with our overriding program of how we can provide more choice and flexibility for the employees wherever they're working, whether it be home, mobile, or in the office. And we see the evolution of the office being much more task-orientated, set up to service the way you're going to work, whether that be collaboratively, whether that be privately, etc. So we see a lot of what we're doing now is repurposing our offices for that agility that are required by our customers.
Brilliant. Thanks, Michael. Great to get some insight into what you're doing at SAP. And Julie, how about you? What's happening at Sutherland?
Hi, Natalie, and hello, everybody. I too am at home. My background looks a bit more white than yours, Michael. And I guess, so I am responsible for kind of all things people, HR in the EMEA region for Sutherland. Sutherland is a global digital process transformation organisation, and kind of evolved from the world of business process outsourcing. And you know, the added dynamic that we have is that we're supporting our clients. You know, so globally we're operating in 84 countries, with 40,000 plus employees, and in EMEA, I currently support 7 countries, but we're kind of looking at expansion at the moment, which is kind of this part of the story of post-COVID, with about 5,000 employees. I feel, you know, we operate across many market verticals, and when you look at some of the verticals in travel and industry, for example, they've been hard hit. You know, it's one of the observations I've seen with COVID of some, you know, organizations maybe who've thrived and offered a different proposition or changed their offering to the market, and those who've kind of really been hit hard, you know, the travel industry being an example of that. So we, as an organisation, you know, we've done well in terms of being able to look after our employees. We moved 70+% of our employees to work at home. And in my region, that was kind of across the space of 3 weeks. Another interesting kind of thing to have observed over the past year is country by country. You know, it's a bit like a Mexican wave of COVID hitting. And, you know, then so our first kind of emergency response program was put into play, and we learned from that as we went along. So we currently have still the majority of our employees working from home, so remote working, and we've developed platforms to enable that. So we kind of, through Sutherland Anywhere, we are able to offer remote training, onboarding, coaching, for all of the things that previously we did in an office environment. And I think, thinking about how I see things evolving, as this has gone on for so long, I can't imagine ever going back to the way that we used to work and have an office-based environment and operation. There'll be a dynamic that I think we're yet to see in terms of where our clients land on the whole, infrastructure, their preference, kind of what security looks like, what performance and how we measure performance. But I do, my gut feel is that we will stay as kind of predominant remote working with the need to offer flexibility. So when you think about it from an employee perspective, we're not just in, kind of in the four walls of our organization, even though they're remote walls. We're in a marketplace where employees have choice. So that's, another major dynamic of what are employees going to want to do. And I think the headlines are that they want flexibility and they like remote working. So trying to work all of that out as we go step by step.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? So much to it. And I think Julie's come from a HR background and Michael from a workplace background. And I guess my role encompasses both of those, and this whole pandemic has meant that we brought those two parts of our organisation, I'm sure you have as well, much closer together. You can't talk about property and people as separate things anymore. It's definitely all in the mix together. So I work for Lloyds Banking Group, which is one of the largest retail and commercial banks in the UK, predominantly UK based. So I've definitely empathised with you having to worry about what's happening from a COVID perspective across the world, because it's all happening at different times, isn't it, across different countries, jurisdictions. But I look after two elements. So the future of work strategy. So how do we bring together the people, technology and workplace strategy for us as an organisation? And we have around 70 offices and 1,300 branches in terms of our workplaces. And then I look after also the future workplace strategy and delivery. So, what do those offices need to look like in the future? How many do we need? We were at about 65% utilisation. So it makes me feel a bit better talking to you, Michael, before COVID. But we know we're going to have probably double the amount of space that we're going to need long term. But it's really about, as you said, Julie, getting this right for the people that work for us. So we've got 70,000 colleagues, and they all do a real mix of roles. So from working in a branch to a call centre to a head office type role. And we're taking quite a different strategy, I think, from other organisations who have gone either, full colleague choice, so work from anywhere type strategy, or 2 or 3 days a week at home or 2 or 3 days a week in an office. We've tailored it to the roles that individuals are doing. So for some of our roles, they'll be quite remote based, and the other roles, like our branch colleagues, will be 100% of their time in branch because they need to be serving our customers. So it makes it quite hard to communicate in a headline in a newspaper, but it's very much focused on the activity that everyone's doing every day and where is the best place to do that. So very activity led.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're grappling with, and I'd like to get both of your thoughts on it. How do we get the right balance between what employees want? So Julie, you mentioned the fact that if we don't offer flexible working moving forward, people will go elsewhere. And then what organisations need. And those two things might not be in complete alignment. So how do you get the balance right between what an individual needs and what the organisation needs? Julie, should I start with you?
Sure. So I think, there's been a lot of research that has been accessible over the past year. And one of the statistics I saw was that 69% of millennials value remote working and flexibility above any other benefit. So really don't think it's something that we can ignore, in that the employee needs are, they're going to have choice, and at the same time, we've always been in we are in an industry where our clients are, we contract with our clients to provide, services to them. So your example of having people at the branch and, supporting the clients. I think what we need to embrace is being more transparent with our workforce around what our business needs are and what our clients' needs are, and treating our employees as adults, in that the more they can see of what our challenges are, and what we're there to serve, I think the better able we can come to a balanced decision on compromise that allows flexibility, that allows some remote working, and but also at the end of the day, we've got to deliver, because otherwise we have no business. I don't think that my industry has worked in that way before. It's kind of been more, we've got to meet our client needs. If that means that we've got to introduce night shifts or weekend shifts, we've got to do that. But how we then do that, I think, is going to be the key, and the only way really to keep our people and keep them engaged, and is to get them to have more of a bit of a say of how we do that as a team, team by team. So you can kind of introduce some flexibility, because otherwise, I just see that there's going to be organisations offering flexibility, and people are going to be attracted to that. They've had this for so long now.
Yeah, there's almost got to be a purpose as well, hasn't there? It's got to be, if you're being asked to go into an office or you're going away from home, it's why is that important? Yeah. How about you, Michael? How are you thinking about this at SAP?
Some really good points made there, and I think, who is it that actually would know the best about how to get the best out of any individual in the way they work? It's the individual. So to me, it's a lot of it is about offering that choice and flexibility and how, when, and where you work. Of course, it has to be aligned with managers. And there's another key point that we're looking into very carefully is managers need some training on how to manage employees in a flexible manner. It's the new way of working, and some managers are not used to that. So I believe there's an important part of a training element to get managers to manage on results, not where you're based, etc. So that will certainly be part of the offering. And I think when we look at what people are doing, it has to be role dependent, as mentioned before. For example, if I send my receptionist home to work from home, I don't think that's going to work so well. but there are other roles you can. So like a developers for SAP, that's a really interesting story for us, because before COVID, no way we can work from home, though. We have to be in the office, one-to-one desk, that's it. The last year and a bit shows that actually they don't have to do that, and the eyes have been opened, and they're very much more progressive on the way they work. So developers need quiet to develop stuff. So a home office situation, maybe in some situations, is pretty good for them. However, they then need to come to a scrum team to try taking that development further in a team atmosphere, where an office can be a very good way of facilitating that. So to me, I think it's a bit about what I said earlier, is purpose those offices to facilitate the ways of working, take away the rows of desks that are all the same, and put collaboration areas, put concentration areas in it, put different ways of working within the office. So when they come to the office, which will be one of the choices, that they have the exact environment they need for the work, the tasks that they're doing. And I do think this has to be a partnership with the manager, that for sure that the manager has to agree the way of working with the employees and the way they can get the best out of the employees and their teams as well. So it is not just an employee situation, but in our industry, attracting, retaining talent is, as in many, is absolutely key. That's our number one asset, is the talent, the people that develop and sell our software. So making sure we have a progressive offering for those people that's market leading is really, really important. And I think especially the younger generations, they value that hugely. The working conditions may be older than the older generations before them. So interesting developments.
Yeah, definitely. And that, you talked about a lot of things there that we're thinking about as well. But we're thinking about kind of three elements: the business or maybe leadership, and what they need in terms of customer. What does a team need? Because we want to, if our offices are going to be much more focused around collaboration and connection, when you go into an office, you want to make sure that the people you work with are around. So how do you contract on that, or have a discussion around that, so you agree some kind of team ways of working principles, and then your individual needs. So we have, I might be doing the same job as Julie, but we want to work in completely different ways because we have really different preferences around our working environment. And it's all three of those things need to be balanced and discussed together to work out what the right way is of working for every individual. But yeah, it's a big challenge for us to face, and we won't get it right first time. It's something we're going to need to continue to evolve, I think. And we talked a little bit about the role of the office and how that might evolve. How are you defining the role of the office for your organisation moving forward, and how are you describing the purpose of the office? Julie, we'll start with you.
I think one of the things that goes through my mind when I consider that question is what country and culture we're in. So for me, there is no one answer to that, because in different cultures, I have Egypt as one of the countries in my region, and particularly the young females want to get out and be in an office environment because that also becomes their social outlet and their community. So I've missed visiting, so much, and they. So for them, it's all about their community and friendships, and they act, they work and play together. And then, in the UK, I haven't been inside one of our offices, for over a year now. So it will depend on, the kind of the local country norms, and building that into, kind of where we land with this. And it's definitely going to be a hybrid model. But I do think then, I think maybe common would be that we would use the office more for collaboration, for getting people together for events and celebrations. Personally, there's nothing worse than trying to do a celebration over Zoom. It just is, there's just lost the soul of that that event is lost. So I think it won't be the same for us in across our footprint, but I think the common thing will be where you actually want to get people together and collaborate. You want to bring, have some energy into, build, a process where previously you would get people together, and some social element to it.
Yeah, that's a really good, and I love your point on the different countries and cultures. That's so interesting around how the role the office plays in society. Are there any countries or cultures that you've, in your organisation where remote working was just not a thing pre-COVID, and you've been really surprised with how far that's gone, and kind of maybe where the direction's going to go with remote working post-COVID?
Many. I mean, outside of my region, India, we have about 16,000 employees in India. So I think that there's been. I think we've. One thing that I'm really glad about is that we've got rid of the myth that it doesn't work, because it obviously does. The whole thing that you mentioned, Michael, about then the role of the manager in that situation, and the cultural nuances that play into it around trust and not being able to control people and presenteeism and seeing them in front of you. But Philippines as well. Previously the whole culture was centered around the office, and there are different infrastructure challenges in different countries as well. But whole scale, we have managed to keep operating and keep supporting our clients in remote environments. I think going forward, the adoption will kind of follow a pattern around the footprint of what's practical and what works.
Yeah, so interesting having that global lens. And Michael, how about you? How are you defining the purpose of the office at SAP?
Yeah, I think I agree with Julie a lot. This isn't a cookie cutter approach. You can't have a program and say, right, replicate that in every country. It wouldn't succeed. So I think you have a framework, you have a set of principles, but then what you have to do is you have to sit down and analyze the way people are working, the culture, etc. And then what elements of the program will work for them best. And then that's going to be your version of the Flex program for that country. I'm already seeing that in our front runners, we're doing it. So, for example, I'm a car guy, so I kind of almost put offices in car focus. So the old offices that we've sat in for many years, I call those petrol cars. Not very efficient, very polluting, not very good stuff. Then the next step up is a hybrid office, which is a mixture of assigned desks, but also a lot of flexibility and unassigned desks and agile desks. And then you could go to the full electric, which is nothing is assigned. It's fully flexible. It's fully bookable. And I'm seeing in London, we just opened an office, the newer office there, and that is an electric office. It's fully flexible, fully agile, and suits the needs of the community that are using it. Whereas Zurich, where we've also just going live shortly, is a hybrid. There's a mixture of the two. So those are examples of where we've brought flexibility and agility, but we haven't tried to label it as the one approach. It's been adapted to local culture, and I think that is really, really important for the success of any program. Is you take a framework, but you've got the ability to adapt it to what works best in any country.
Yeah, I love that analogy as well. The hybrid. Petrol and electric, it really resonates. It's you've got to step through the different, take people through that journey rather than jumping straight to electric. It's that analogy, isn't it? It's really good. Love that.
Some people can go straight to electric because the mindset's right, the conditions are right, but other times you may have to go through the hybrid. And eventually, honestly, I believe in 5-6 years' time, it will be all electric. That's my viewpoint on how it will evolve. But taking people to full electric in all the countries now would be a stretch too far.
Is that similar to how you... Go on, Julie.
No, it just makes me think that it's because we're in this now, aren't we? When we saw organisations very early on into the pandemic saying we're never going to ask people to come back into the office, I was like, wow, just hold your horses. It's too early to make those statements, and then you've got everybody else nervous about, do we need to do that too? And we're still going through a huge change process, and the psychology of change is that people will go through it at different stages, and people will, there's maybe, I reference the millennials, they'll, well, why wouldn't you just go to the total electric model now? Whereas, we're working with, a lot of people who are still holding on dearly to the things that have been, represented work for them for many years, and it's going to take a bit longer to change. So I think we're still in the change curve.
Definitely.
And we won't recognise that until we come out and we look back and we reflect on how we adapted to it, and what our thought process was in the middle of it.
And there's also so much change going on outside of work, isn't there? So I always say in the UK, for example, when we were in lockdown, you really missed the office because of that social interaction. You weren't getting any of that outside of work. So your only social interaction was really on Zoom. Whereas, or when the children were at home, because people were having, childcare challenges, it wasn't a normal working from home environment. And so we've had all of this trauma. I heard someone say the other day, it's been quite a traumatic year for everyone. You kind of need to let the dust settle a little bit and work out how does hybrid working feel in the new normal, outside of work as well as within the workplace.
Yeah.
And what do you see some of the challenges that we're going to face over the next 12, 24 months with hybrid working? What are some of the things that we're going to need to really watch out for, some of the risks? Michael?
Gosh, yeah, that's a difficult question, because it's the speed of change has many other implications from tax and from other reasons as well. So from when we're looking at countries, we have more progressive countries and less progressive countries. So I do think in this and in many other things, the examples of our front runners running well and people adopting become the snowballs for the rest. So I often see that, and in other programs that we've done in the past, is when you get the successes, everyone wants to be on that train. So I do believe by proving concept, which we're doing now with our front runners, I believe that will then help us adapt. And I honestly believe that the office evolution will never finish. We will keep evolving the office to suit the needs, and that will be in very strong partnership with HR and IT. Absolutely vital that the three of us in facilities, HR and IT, are working together for our customers. And I think that's one of the changes, and could be one of the dangers, Natalie, if we don't do that. We fragment, we don't provide solutions that are right across the board in ways of working. We may say, okay, we provide the facilities element, but the HR element hasn't been provided yet, and the customer gets confused and we don't have a proper package. So I would say that's one of the dangers, is to make sure that we are completely aligned in our support departments for our internal customers, and basically saying the same thing, doing the same thing in terms of the consistency of what we want to bring and the change. I like to think we're on a good road here in SAP, but it's very important that that element is not neglected and we don't silo ourselves in front of our customers.
Yeah, that join up. So we've got the join up of technology, HR and workplace or facilities. I think, Julie, you said about kind of not rushing to an answer. That's definitely a risk, that this is something that's so important to people that you need to get it right and keep evolving it. And then I think we also said about not taking a one-size-fits-all approach, and you were talking about that in terms of countries, and I can definitely see that in terms of roles, that it just doesn't work. It's got to be more tailored. Is there anything else, Julie, that you think you're seeing as some of the longer-term risks?
Specifically with hybrid working, there's some research that is kind of already 10 years old that showed an equality issue where there's people are more likely to get promoted and progress their career and progress their salary if they're in the office with their boss and getting FaceTime. So the research indicates that potentially if women are taking time out, maternity leave and so on, that's already been seen to be a pattern. So that, I think, is a risk for the longer term, that people who are more kind of passionate about getting their progressing their career and so on will want to be there and want to be in kind of in an office. But I actually think that that's probably an older view that's being layered on a way of working that we're yet to see settled, and that hopefully will be more kind of forward thinking on how we manage careers in this kind of flexible working space. And I think just there are compliance issues around the country that you are employed in. That it's not as simple as saying you can go and work in Singapore for 6 months and it's okay, because there are whichever country you're in, there's tax and kind of insurance, boring stuff to consider, that has an impact on where people can work.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That geographical flexibility is constrained in some way by some of the implications.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so compliance came out, equality and that presenteeism culture. How do you stop that coming back in, and so creeping back, I guess, to whoever's around the boss gets promoted. And I guess
and that's again part of the management. That's again, sorry, Natalie, that's again part of the management training I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Managers need that training to say it's by results, not by where you are. And that is a very old way of thinking. It's where you are, and I hope that will change. I'm sure it will.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and I think from a diversity perspective, I'm hoping that it opens up opportunities, that certain talent pools and people, employees that you wouldn't have been able to attract before, might be more attracted to roles if you've got greater levels of flexibility. So I guess it swings both ways. And I think my underlying nervousness, I guess, or overall risk, is that we just don't make the most of the opportunity. I think we've all learned so much about hybrid working over the last year, what works, what doesn't. And it feels like we've got this once in a generation opportunity to really change the way we work and live. And I just hope that we make the most of that rather than kind of reverting back to type from how things were before.
Definitely.
And we've talked a little bit about bringing together that technology or IT element, the people, HR teams, workplace facilities management, depending on what you call those teams. What specific technology changes do you think that we're going to need to make to support hybrid working, and how are we going to use technology in the workplace differently? Julie?
I think, from an HR or people perspective, one of the first things that comes to mind is engagement, and inclusion and social networks. And, we've already implemented technology to, as I mentioned earlier, deliver training remotely and coach people in new jobs and onboard people. And another country nuance, which I find quite amusing, is in Bulgaria, they changed the law to allow e-signatures on contracts of employment, whereas previously it took about an hour, if not more, when a new joiner came to sit and sign all of their contracts and all of the appendices to their contracts. And now we can do it all remote, it's all e-signature. And that's, our organisation were at the forefront in talking to the government, and they got that law changed at the start of COVID, which was obviously a really sensible thing, because it allowed people to, not need to come into the office to sign their contracts of employment. And when I asked my HR director to raise this, and he was going to an event with the Egyptian government and some of their peers, they kind of looked at him and was like, no, that would, we can't do that. And I said, just you wait. I said, a couple of years' time and they'll think you had a crystal ball, because they will inevitably, kind of move to e-signatures. But, not just even the infrastructure, but the way a country thinks about these things, will help embrace technology and digitization, at a different pace.
Yeah, definitely. So interesting that digitization of processes, particularly from a people perspective, technology will play such an important role. How about from a facilities management perspective, Michael? There's lots of technological developments there.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a technology company, you would expect us to be exploring those, which I think we are. So I'm there's two aspects to this, really. From the employee's perspective, we're looking for them to have one app that does everything for them. So whether it's book a desk or a meeting room or lunch or a courier or anything, see where your local restaurants are, that's where we're going as our North Star. It's going to take us a bit of time to get there. You know, we've obviously started with the obvious things like the desk booking app, which is important for flexible and agile space. But I see that ever evolving so that the employee has the ability to do anything from this one app on the move, whether at home or wherever they are. I also am a huge believer in the smart office. So I want to look at how my spaces are being used and adapt them before my customer even knows they need adapting. So I'll see that there's sensors and technologies that my collaboration space is overloaded, but my concentrations is underloaded. So I'd like to be able to see that, make the change before the customer even realizes there was a problem. So I see it also helping us to run from a facilities point of view, smart offices that will adapt and evolve statistics and information and digital information, etc.
Yeah, I really like that preempting things before people are aware. Sorry, Julie.
Exactly.
No,
and I think the message you're giving to the leadership team is exactly we've made some changes, but it's on the basis of this data. We think it's going to help you be more effective and operationally improve what you're doing. That's a great message for a facilities or an HR or any organisation to keep supporting the customers to come with there and say we're fixing a problem before you knew you had a problem. It's quite a neat way of smart office design.
Yeah, we just we're developing an app that our employees are using, and we're adding functionality to it at the moment, and we're talking about an SOS facility. So kind of it feels linked to knowing people are safe. All we've been through is, I think, really important to employees. I think that keeps them engaged in a fundamental way, and then you can use technology to add to that, which is great.
Yeah, that's really.
I think it's also very important. You can fall into the trap for using technology for technology's sake. There always has to be an end result which you can explain to your customers of why you're doing this, what your development is on technology, and it's always going to be focused on the customer and providing better services to the customer. I do see that maybe one of the dangers we talked about earlier is people investing in technology not really for a purpose that's going to help the business. So I think that's something in the past maybe we fall into quite a lot in a lot of companies. We're very focused that we don't do that here for sure.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it has been quite overwhelming for people, the amount that we're relying on technology now, and using lots of different types of communications channels. So we use WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams, email. When do you use what channel, and having that always on type mentality, I know has been quite challenging for people and has caused burnout and a lot of exhaustion, I think, over the last 12 months. We're also thinking about technology from like a workplace perspective. How do you enable hybrid working when you've got some people working in the office and some people at home? What's been quite nice and inclusive over the last 12 months, where we've got the majority of people working from home, is everyone's in the same situation, and you kind of have that. It's been quite a good experience, whereas before, when you used to dial into a meeting and you were the only one that was at home and everyone else was in the office, it was horrible. It was hard to get words and edgeways, and it was very it wasn't a very inclusive environment. So we're looking at how to use technology to help with that, kind of more of a hybrid model. So we touched a little bit there on well-being and emotional health. So I think we've really focused on employee well-being, and Julie, I really liked your SOS kind of point in the app around feeling safe. That's been such a big point of focus, I guess, for organisations over the last 12 months. How do you think we can continue to prioritise employee health and well-being beyond the pandemic, Julie?
I think it's been one of the biggest turning points for me in this past year of my own personal view of being in HR around the well-being of employees. And I think that, people have got to take responsibility for their own well-being. But an organisation has a huge impact on some, an individual's well-being, and that's kind of brought, the message to me that I've kind of resonated with me is that, well-being underpins engagement. Organisations throw lots of resources and money at, the types of engagement that go above the foundations of people feeling safe and cared for. And when you've got employees in an office environment, you can see them, and you can see if somebody's maybe appearing to be more anxious, whereas with remote working, you can't. So I think it's more around educating managers, people managers, on the mental health and moving away from the stigma of talking about mental health, and what that might look like in terms of anxiety and stress, and that often kind of a health issue can be behind a performance issue. So in HR, where it's one of our things that we're famous for, performance management, and you go in and you address the problem of what's occurred rather than understanding why it occurred. So I've changed our kind of emphasis on talking to people managers, of understanding and creating awareness of well-being, in particular of mental health, and what that means to how we engage with people, and how we take care of our people, and how we don't, we try not to cause more stress. You said it earlier, Natalie, people are human beings. They've got one head and mind, and and you can't separate out the other stresses in life when you go to work. And making people feel comfortable about that, and getting managers equipped and confident to talk to the team about it, I think is going to be a huge game changer.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen the more human side of our colleagues and employees and leaders, haven't we, through the last 12 months? It's how do we hold on to some of that human element, and asking people how they are more regularly, and having those more open conversations. Any thoughts from you, Michael, on health and wellbeing? Obviously, workplace plays a big role in that.
Yeah, I completely echo what Julie says. I agree with everything there. It's something that the SAP board is wrestling with the whole time. And I can say actually on Tuesday this week, the whole of SAP was on holiday. It was a mental health day, so the instruction was completely switch off. And everyone respected. I turned my laptop back on the following day, and no work emails. So it was fully respected, and I think that's an example of the board saying this is important, and I think it was a great bit of leadership by the SAP board for sure. Well-being is hard, and we talked about earlier about this. What we're doing, flex and agility, there's a danger where you're on 24/7, and we're providing the technology and the workplace and the time that kind of means you can be on 24/7, and that is a bad thing. I think the management training, the management education in this area as a skill set they need to wrestle with is really important. One of the things that we do, and a lot of companies do, is we survey quite heavily. And a lot of those survey questions are about business health culture index and things like that. So we're looking into regularly how people are managed, what their stress levels are, and hopefully taking corrective actions if we're seeing warning signs in our surveys as well. But kind of the bottom line, nothing takes away from the one-to-one manager-employee engagement. That's so important to look at the employees' needs and requirements, to look at their work pattern. How can they get the best employee, but how can they also protect that employee from being too much on? And I think that's so important that managers and employees strike the right balance in those conversations. Absolutely.
Yeah, really, the role of the manager is the most important thing, isn't it, in terms of how people are feeling, how engaged they are, how they're managing their health and wellbeing at work. How do we prepare our leaders in our organisation to lead in a different way? I think you said that right at the beginning, Michael. I'm conscious of time. We said this before, didn't we? We could talk about these topics all day because it's so interesting. But I thought I'd just finish up with one final question. for those people listening from other organisations who are thinking about or leading on their future of work, workplace strategy, the way that their hybrid working model moving forward, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them? Michael?
Natalie, that's a real tough question. Before I answer, I will say, how many times in the past 25 years has the board of pretty much all major corporations put so much importance on this topic? Never. And it's really actually good. We said seize the day. We have boards caring passionately about doing the right thing in this area. So we've got the air cover. Now for us, and the piece of advice I would give is listen. Absolutely listen. So it's all very well putting the programs together, but listen to your employees, talk to your employees, discuss with them solutions and what you're doing, bring them around on the change church. But to do that, you've got to start listening first of all. So open your minds and listen, and then see how can we make that fit into the program.
Great advice. Really like that. Thank you. Julie?
I think if I choose one, it's going to be, human-centric and building the trust in our people to deliver for us by treating them as humans, showing empathy, and keeping the communication open, showing respect. And I think they will, do their organisation proud. This wake-up call, whatever it is our opportunity to do that.
Yeah, really good. Love that. I guess mine would be similar around trusting individuals. So whether that's leaders who definitely might need some support with how to lead in a different way, but as you said, I think earlier, Michael, they're leaders and our employees are the ones that will know best how can they best serve their customers, do their role in the right way, however that might be. And really think about, I guess, to your point, Julie, around human-centric. Everyone's individual, and I don't think we've said this throughout about one size doesn't fit all. Everyone has a really different view on how they want to work moving forward, so we need to respect that and allow some element of flexibility for different individuals and different roles. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for. So our 3 top tips, I think, were listen. Really make sure you listen to your employees and understand what they're saying and their thoughts, and build that into your strategy. Make sure it's human-centric. And then thirdly, one size doesn't fit all. So thank you very much both to Julie and to Michael for your time today. It's been so insightful and interesting to hear what you're doing both at SAP and at Sutherland. And if you've got any questions, please put them into the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.